coming out of the kettle at 240 degrees. We're going to let it sit and cool here for about 10 minutes. This is going to be some of our peanut butter fudge, so we'll add about 5 pounds of Jif peanut butter to it. Within the 10 minutes of it sitting on this marble slab, the marble will draw the heat out of it and take it from about 240 degrees to about 120. Alright guys, here we have some Jif peanut butter going into the batch. We have about 5 pounds here. We're going to just let it sit and cool here on the marble for just a hot minute, and when we start mixing this up, all of the warm fudge will actually melt all the peanut butter right into the batch. It'll mix in really nicely. Alright, now that about 10 minutes has passed, the fudge is cooled off enough to where I can take the bars off and it won't hopefully run off onto the floor. Might have to hustle a little bit to make sure that doesn't happen, but we'll see. Like I said earlier, it's was starting out at 240 degrees, about 120, 110 degrees now, so it's cooled down a decent amount. Okay, now that I got the bars off, what I'm doing now is step number 5. It's called creaming. We call it that because it mixes all the sugars and other ingredients together to give it a nice smooth creamy texture. This is where the peanut butter is going to really start to melt in as well. Mixing in that warm fudge with the cooler peanut butter. And that actually accelerates this batch. So usually it takes about 10 minutes to do this step. Because the peanut butter is cool, I'll be mixing it in. It'll start to cool the rest of the batch a lot faster. So I only have to do this step for about maybe 2 minutes or so. Still see the big globs in the middle, but soon it will be nice and consistent and smooth. You work from the outside in. Make sure that it doesn't fall onto the floor, too much at least. Anything that does hit the floor, we always give out as free samples. Just kidding, of course. You also notice that it's thickened up a bit and cooled down quite a bit because it's not moving nearly as fast. I can just kind of hang out and chill, and it's not going to really try to flow off the table too much for me. That also means that I'm done with this step. So I'm going to stretch it out on the table as evenly as I possibly can so that when I do stack it up into a loaf shape, every slice that I cut will be pretty close to the previous one, about a ½ pound per piece of fudge. Alright, so I'm done with this tool that we call a creamer, and we're going to start our next step, which is step number 6, called loafing. I'll do that here in just a moment. Try not to waste any fudge, so all this fudge that's outside of the big slab here, we scrape off the table and we try to pop it right back in the fudge so we're not wasting anything. Go to the sides and make some nice straight lines to try to make it a nice even rectangle. And now I'm starting step number 6, loafing. And we just call it that because we're basically building it up into a loaf shape, so this will end up looking like a huge loaf of bread. Every time I do this, it will consolidate to the middle more and more until eventually it is a loaf shape. See, I started out like right here, and you'll notice that the fudge really isn't spreading at all. It's staying pretty much about 6-8 inches in. Now I'll do the same thing to the other side. Stack it over and over. Like I said earlier, the peanut butter helps accelerate this batch, so I'm actually almost done. A couple more flips here. Look at that, retaining its shape pretty well. Alright, now I'm going to use a smaller tool. We call this a shiner. This is still step 6 loafing, but it's kind of a sub-step of it called shining, and we call it that because it smooths out the batch to give it a nice, smooth, kind of shine look. Just go over it over and over, smooth it on out. The same thing on the other side as well. This also helps with making it nice and consistent. If there's a little bit of extra fudge on one portion, I'm able to kind of slide the fudge down to make it nice and even. I'm pushing a little bit of fudge as well as I find those bigger spots on the batch. And that's pretty much it as far as making the fudge goes. We're going to let it sit here and do step number 7, cooling. And then we will cut it in about 5 minutes. Alright, this has been sitting here for about 5 minutes, and it's solidified enough where I can cut it into pieces. So this first end piece we usually just give out as samples. So I'm just going to pop it at the end here. So every other piece we're going to aim for about half a pound, which is on this scale is about 8 ounces. See how we do on our first one here. Oh, 7 3/4 of an ounce, so that is pretty close. We sell all our fudge by the pound, so if it does weigh a little light, the price will be a little cheaper. That's always good. All right, about the same, pretty close to 8 ounces. So once I get kind of dialed in, I've done this so many times, I can just kind of keep going, and all of them should be relatively the same size. After every time I cut, I also scrape the knife, you'll notice, and that helps make sure there's a nice smooth cut every time. No jaggedness to it. Cuts like butter. This is about 30 pounds of fudge. And since they're half-pound pieces, that makes about 60 pieces of fudge total per batch. We'll on average make about 15-20 of these batches a day. So that's a pretty decent amount of fudge.